A massive thank you to Mango for bringing you today's video via Patreon. Hello all and welcome to the EDH channel. I'd like to thank you all for your patience and your encouragement for this new venture of the EDH channel. This is the first ever paper gameplay that the channel has seen. So I hope you all enjoy it. Your feedback and sharing and liking the video will be very much appreciated. And with that being said, we'll get to the opening hands. PJ from Commander Replay is joining us with his Aurelia the War Leader Angels deck. He starts with a Snow Plains, a Mistveil Plains, a Flooded Strand, Mask of Memory, Aura of Silence, Dawnbreak Reclaimer, and Angel of Serenity. Nothing to equip that Mask of Memory on to get himself into card draw, but he does have a little bit of control in Aura of Silence, so hopefully he doesn't get left behind here. Next up is patron of the channel Mango with Ghired Conclave Exile. He starts off with a pretty perfect hand all things considered, has all three of his colours, some ramp in Sol Ring, and then some big creatures to slam that Rishkar's expertise into and hopefully completely refill his hand. Next up it's Joe piloting Osgir the Reconstructor. He starts off with a basic Plains, Thespian Stage and Urza's Mine, so is obviously running Tron in this deck. Then Boros Signet for some ramp and colour fixing, Thrilling Discovery for some card draw, Austere Command, and Mere Battlesphere is probably going to be discard fodder for the Thrilling Discovery, so he's already got his first few turns planned out here, I imagine. And then I am last in the turn order, bringing you Wilhelt the Rock Cleaver. Plenty of opening mana in my hand, a couple of snow-covered swamps, a Myriad Landscape for some fixing as well as ramp, Talisman of Dominance and Commander Sphere for more ramp, and then Vizier of the Scorpion and Lord of the Undead, or the zombies we're starting out with. Best of luck to all my opponents, of course. You can find links to anything that they wanted to share with all of you in the description below. And let's get to the channel's first ever game of Paper EDH. Hope you enjoy it. PJ kicks us off on turn 1 with a Mistveil Plains. Then Mango starts as he means to go on with a snow-covered forest into a turn 1 Sol Ring.
Yep, here we go.
Basic Plains for Joe. And I play a tapped Myriad Landscape. On turn 2, PJ plays and cracks a Flooded Strand, grabs a Plateau, and casts Mask of Memory. Mango throws down a snow-covered mountain and taps his 2 lands for a Steve. Slayer's Stronghold for Joe. And then he plays himself a Boros Signet. I play Snow-covered Swamp, and tap those down for a Talisman of Dominance. PJ gets down a turn 3 Snow-covered Plains, and then plays an aggressive Aura of Silence shooting Mango Sol Ring. But then potentially regrets it immediately with an Aura Shards coming into play for Mango. Joe goes for an Urza's Mine and then taps out into his commander. I crack Myriad Landscape for a couple of basic islands and play a Sunken Hollow in tapped. PJ slams down a Pulse Mage Advocate and equips. Ghired enters with a 4/4 Rhino, both of which trigger the Aura Shards, blowing up the Boros Signet and the Mask of Memory. Joe just plays a Thespian Stage and decides to pass this turn. I play a Snow Island, and then just to impress Joe, I fearlessly cast Commander Sphere straight into the Aura Shards. And then I play Vizier Scorpion, which comes in with an army token, and my zombie tokens have Death Touch. A Burnished Heart comes down for PJ. Mango casts Rampant Growth and goes for a Snow-covered Forest. Mango turns his commander and the Rhino in sideways towards PJ, populating another Rhino into play, which triggers the Aura Shards and blows up the Burnished Heart. And with that, PJ passes through blocks and decides to take the 10 damage and 3 commander. During Mango's end step, Joe decides to make his Thespian Stage a copy of the Plateau, then plays a Darksteel Citadel during his own turn. Osgir with Vigilance takes his 4 commander damage in towards Mango, and in a fit of rage decides to scoop it up on us. We decide to assume that he took that and go through to the second main, where Osgir will exile the Boros Signet from the graveyard and make 2 token copies of it, and goes on to tap one of his token Boros Signets into a Thrilling Discovery. He discards Faithless Looting, Mere Battlesphere, draws 3 and gains 2 life. I play a Snow Swamp, then cast Wilhelt the Rock Cleaver, then pass over to PJ. During my end step, PJ activates his Pulse Mage Advocate, returning the 3 cards in Joe's graveyard back to his hand and reanimating a Burnished Heart. PJ passes through his turn straight over to Mango, who taps out 6 mana straight into a Kodama of the East tree. And in response to Aura Shards being on the stack from the Kodama, Joe decides to cast Teferi's Protection. Then during his combat step, Mango decides to turn his Ghired and 2 Rhinos in towards PJ, populates another Rhino and that comes in towards me. And with the token coming into play, Mango decides to blow up my Talisman. PJ decides to block Ghired and sacrifice his Burnished Heart in response. Joe phases back in and casts a Cathartic Reunion, filtering the mana from one of his signets. He discards Faithless Looting and Spine of Ishtar before he draws 3 cards. He then plays Battlefield Forge and a Lotus Petal, and then decides to make use of that Spine of Ishtar in his yard immediately, and makes 2 token copies of it, tapping out all of his mana, blowing up the Aura Shards and the Kodama. During my turn, it's another Snow-Covered Swamp, and then a Lord of the Undead, and then I throw down a Plague Belcher, putting 2 minus counters on itself. And then during combat, I decide to hit Mango for 4 points of commander damage. And then at the end of my turn, PJ makes me an offer that I just can't refuse. If I sacrifice my Commander Sphere and draw a card, he will give me my 3 cards that are in my graveyard back with his Pulse Mage Advocate. So we do exactly that. I've drawn from the Commander Sphere, he gives me the 3 cards back and reanimates his own Burnished Heart. And then on to PJ's turn, it is a Solemn Simulacrum fetching up a Plains. And the big stompies just keep coming in for Mango, and Ubermauled Hydra this time fetching up a Reliquary Tower. And then decides to turn all of his Rhinos and his Commander in towards Joe for a total of 18 damage and 2 Commander. A tap Snow to start things off for Joe, and then he makes a couple of copies of the Lotus Petal with his Commander. And then decides to tap for 6, including his 2 Boros Signets, to cast an Austere command destroying all creatures. PJ gets to draw a card from the Solemn Simulacrum, and everyone takes 4 to my Plague Belcher from the 4 other zombies dying, and I also end up with 4 decayed zombies thanks to my Wilhelt. And it's noteworthy that Joe decides to keep his Osgir in the graveyard. I put mine in the command zone. Then with his last 2 mana, Joe decides to cast Thrilling Discovery, discarding a Mere Battlesphere and a Monologue Tax, gaining 2 life and drawing 3 cards. I play the Myriad Landscape in to start things off, and it's very important that PJ gets the recognition he deserves here.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I love you.
Say it back. Say it back.
I love you too.
Well, Kai, are you cheating on me?
After that, I decide to make use of these decayed zombies and turn them all in sideways towards Mango, dealing 6 damage to him. Once those zombies go down at the end of combat, I decide to risk a living death. Probably benefits my opponents more than it benefits me, but I do want to get a board on the go. So Osgir and the Mere Battlesphere come back for Joe. I get back the Vizier, the Plague Belcher and my Lord of the Undead. PJ gets his Burnished Heart, his Solemn searching for a land, and also the Pulse Mage Advocate. But the person who benefits the most I think is Mango grabbing a Steve, the Ubermauled Hydra, and the infamous Kodama of the East tree. And with Mango's ETBs on the stack, he gets a free Atali with the Kodama, and grabs a Core Haven with his Ubermauled Hydra.
Kai, if this is how you show your love, I don't think I want it. I don't think I want it anymore.
I love you, Kai. Kai, you're amazing.
And with that, I pass to my end step, and PJ goes for a Swords to Plowshares either onto Atali or Kodama. We collectively decide to plump for Kodama over the Atali. Both are really good targets, but the Kodama can go nuts very quickly, whereas Atali is hopefully only once a turn. He then casts a Jessica's Will, generating enough mana to go for Angel of Serenity, and exiling with that the Atali, the Mere Battlesphere and my Plague Belcher. But in response, Joe decides to crack one of his Lotus Petals in order to activate the Osgir and sacrifice his Mere Battlesphere. Then with his remaining mana and a tap of one of his basics, PJ decides to crack the Burnished Heart for a couple more lands. Then before his turn starts, Mango cracks the Sakura Tribe Elder. Then round 2 Mango's turn, he gets an awesome top deck in Rishkar's Expertise, where his Overmauled Hydra is currently a 9/9. Luckily the free spell wasn't anything too crazy, goes for a free Explosive Vegetation with the Rishkar's Expertise, and with that the Hydra jumps up to an 11/11. During Joe's main phase he plays Inventor's Fair as his land for the turn, and then casts a Zerda. And with that, the Inventor's Fair is only going to cost 2 mana and a sacrifice in order to activate that, so that is exactly what Joe decides to do. Searching up a coveted jewel, and that is all he decides to do for now, so over to my turn. I start off by playing the Talisman back in, thank you PJ, I love you. Then I cast Pact of the Serpent, drawing me 3 cards and losing me 3 life. And then to end my turn I decide to tap out, cracking the Myriad Landscape and playing a Ghoulish Procession. A Plains for PJ. And with that he goes straight through to combat, trying his luck, turning the Solemn Simulacrum in sideways towards the Hydra. But Mango just decides to take the 2. And then during the second main slams down his beloved Gisela. But not to be outdone, Mango goes for a Cinderglade and straight in for a Gisela of his own. Because we need to make the maths really difficult apparently. And then plays what is a very scary Inferno Titan. So that means each ping from the Inferno Titan, if it goes on anything that Joe or myself are doing, will be 4 damage a pop. Luckily the 2 Gisellas cancel each other out when they're pointed at each other's players and creatures. So Mango points all 3 triggers at the Pulse Mage Advocate. However PJ casts a Sujiri Shelter in order to protect it from red. So with that, Mango decides instead to turn the 13/13 Hydra in towards PJ and try and knock his life total down a little bit. In response to attacks, PJ activates his Pulse Mage Advocate targeting Joe, giving him back his Inventor's Fair, Thrilling Discovery, and his Mere Battle Sphere. PJ gets his Burnished Heart back again and chumps the Hydra with it. I get a Decayed Zombie from my enchantment and the Burnished Heart dying. Joe filters one of his token Boros Signets and casts a Thrill of Discovery again. He discards Bronze Guardian and Coveted Jewel to that to gain 2 life and draw 3. Then after that taps down his other Signet, sacrifices the Lotus Petal, and with that mana casts a Trash for Treasure, sacrificing a token Spine of Issar and reanimating his Bronze Guardian. Then Joe taps Osgir for only 4 mana and gets a couple of Coveted Jewels with that. Then with the 6 mana from the Coveted Jewel, decides to play Rout, Hold Priority and float a white mana. And with that priority decides to cast Boros Signet, which will make all of his permanents indestructible. So the 3 of us have our creatures wiped out. PJ draws a card from the Solemn Simulacrum and we get our exiled cards that were underneath the Angel. And I am left with a Decayed Zombie thanks to my enchantment. Then that spells the end of Joe's turn, so he discards a Mere Battle Sphere, Kuldotha Forgemaster, a Scavenger Grounds, Triplicate Titan, and a Temple of Triumph down to hand size. After what feels like the 16th board wipe of the day, I once again decide to try and rebuild my zombie board, starting off with Champion of the Perished. And then for 5 mana cast Phyrexian Delver, that reanimates my Lord of the Undead. I lose 3 life and 2+ counters go on Champion of the Perished. Then recasting the Plague Belcher again, putting 2 minus counters on itself, and another plus counter goes on Champion of the Perished. And with my remaining 2 mana, it's Dreadhorde Invasion. And then before the end of my turn, I decide to swing in the 3/3 Decayed Zombie towards Mango. He only takes 2 unfortunately, but I don't think it's relevant to the outcome of the game. And when the Decayed Zombie is forced to be sacrificed, the Plague Belcher will ping all of my opponents for 1. With that, it's over to PJ's turn, and he decides to nip this zombie army in the bud once again, so casts a Day of Judgment. So 3 other zombies go down, pinging all of my opponents for 3 with the Plague Belcher, and I do leave a Decayed Zombie behind thanks to my enchantment. And after the board wipe, Aurelia comes into play, swinging in at Joe immediately. So not only does he deal 3 commander damage to Joe, but he gets 2 Coveted Jewels, drawing 6 cards, and now has 6 mana available as well. Then because Mango has 9 cards in hand, PJ decides to swing Aurelia in towards him with his second combat. During the second main, PJ plays Homeward Path, then uses one of his newly acquired Coveted Jewels for an Oketra's Monument, and then taps his land and the Coveted Jewel to cast a 4 mana Karmic Guide. It costs 1 less thanks to the Oketra's Monument. The Karmic Guide enters and reanimates the Gisela. Over to Mango's turn, the big beaters keep coming in, but first make sure to cast his Elemental Bond so that he can draw a card after playing the Drakuseth. Thanks to the Inventor's Fair, Joe gains a life during his upkeep, and then plays a Strip Mine to start things off. We forgot that PJ should have a 1/1 token from the Orketra's Monument casting the Karmic Guide as well, so he fixes that quickly. Then it is a 1000-year elixir for Joe. Then filtering mana through the 2 Boros Signets, he uses 1 red and 2 white for a Feldon. 1 red is still floating. Then with the floating mana and 2 from his lands, he activates Feldon to get a copy of Triplicate Titan. After that, the next spell is Key to the City. He taps it and discards a Mishra's Bauble to make his brand new Triplicate Titan unblockable. And then thanks to Feldon giving the Triplicate Titan haste, it is able to turn in sideways and unblocked straight at PJ. Luckily for him, he only takes 4 thanks to his Gisela. But Joe does get his coveted jewels back, so gets to draw 6. Immediately tapping those coveted jewels for Boros, he puts 4 into Hedron Archive, then taps that immediately for 2 mana, so he's got 2 colourless and 2 white floating, and with that casts Unwinding Clock. Feldon triggers during the end step, and he is forced to sacrifice his token copy of the Triplicate Titan, getting 3 3/3 tokens into play. 1 with Flying, 1 with Vigilance, and 1 with Trample. Thanks to a creature dying, I get a Decayed Zombie before my turn starts. So during my untap step, Joe gets to untap all of his artifacts, including 1 land in the Darksteel Citadel. I play Gravespawn Sovereign. I also got an army token into play thanks to Dreadhorde Invasion during the upkeep. Then I decide to just hold up my Gravespawn Sovereign and keep some cards in hand for after the inevitable next board wipe. When I leave my first main phase, Joe decides to untap his Feldon with the 1000-year elixir, and then put the extra mana into the Feldon to reanimate his Triplicate Titan again. Then going through to my end step, it is forced to sacrifice itself, and he gets 3 more of those tokens. That does mean that I get a Decayed Zombie this turn, because I haven't made one yet. Again during my turn though, and before PJ's, Joe goes for Faithful Absence onto the Gisela. So PJ gets a clue token and Gisela goes down. Joe untaps all of his artifacts during PJ's untap step again. PJ doesn't pay for the Karmic Guide during his upkeep, so that goes down and I get another Decayed Zombie. Then the first spell is a Steel Shaper's Gift, searching for an equipment. He tutors up a Death Render with that. Then PJ cracks his clue token to draw a card. He then goes for Aurelia Exemplar of Justice before casting Austere Command, blowing up artifacts and enchantments. In response, Joe cracks the Hedron Archive to draw 2 cards, then uses 1000-year elixir to untap Feldon again. Feldon reanimates Kuldotha Forgemaster. Then again, thanks to the 1000-year elixir, Kuldotha Forgemaster can be activated again straight away, so he taps that down, sacrifices the Spine of Ishtar token and 2 Vigilance tokens as well. And it is Soul of New Phyrexia that comes into play from the Kuldotha, and with the rest of his mana activates that to make his permanents indestructible until the end of the turn. The rest of us have our artifacts and enchantments blown up. I sacrifice the Commander Sphere in order to draw a card. Then it's through to combat. PJ swings in Aurelia the War Leader in towards me, and the +2 buff goes on there, so that is 5 commander damage. And then during his second combat he swings in at me again, this time for 7 commander. At the end of the turn, Mango decides to go for the Boros Charm, shooting Joe in the face for 4 damage. Then it's round to Mango's turn, he untaps, Joe continues to untap his artifacts thanks to that Unwinding Clock. First thing Mango goes for is a Nature's Claim targeting the Soul of New Phyrexia. In response, Joe makes his permanents indestructible until the end of the turn. And then with the floating red, he untaps Feldon. We missed that Joe should have gained 4 life here as well, but it's not relevant. Next creature in Mango's arsenal is Wulfgar. And after that, Atali comes into play again. Then before allowing Mango to go through to combat, Joe has some things to do here. He activates Kuldotha, sacrificing his 2 Tramplers and a Key to the City. He grabs Duplicant from the Forge Master, exiling the Drakuseth. And with that, there's nothing Mango can do, so it's round to Joe's turn again. Land for the turn is Ancient Tomb. He taps his coveted jewels for 6 and casts Winds of Abandon. I unfortunately was holding up a Liliana Standard Bearer, but without a sack outlet, the exile is really going to hurt here. So about all I can do here instead is activate my Gravespawn Sovereign, reanimating the Triplicate Titan under my control so that it gets exiled by Joe's spell. But with that on the stack, Joe responds with Feldon, making a copy of the Triplicate Titan. And then he untaps the Feldon and does it again. With that, Joe moves to combat. He sends 2 Triplicate Titans in at PJ. He sends 22 exactly into Mango, that is 2 3/3 flyers, the Soul of New Phyrexia, Kuldotha Forgemaster, and the 7/7 Duplicant. All Mango can do is Core Haven the 7/7, so it doesn't deal any combat damage this turn. So Mango takes 15, that knocks PJ out of the game. Then during the main, Joe goes for Reconstruct History, bringing back Fateful Absence, Bronze Guardian as his artifact, Trash for Treasure as his sorcery, and Monologue Tax for the enchantment. Not done there, he goes for that Trash for Treasure, sacrificing one of the Triplicate Titans, and that reanimates his Hedron Archive. I untap, Joe untaps all of his artifacts. I finally recast my commander for 6 mana, then Diagraph Captain as another aristocrat effect. I then play Command Tower as my land for the turn. Then Gary comes into play, only for 4 Devotion to Black, but it keeps Mango in play at least. And that's about all I've got, so continuing to hold up the Liliana Standard Bearer, I pass at that. At the end of my turn, Feldon is untapped and then activated again to get a copy of Mere Battlesphere. Then the Mere Battlesphere and 2 of the Mere tokens get sacrificed to Kuldotha Forgemaster. Tutors up Combustible Gearhulk, targeting Mango, which of course allows him to draw 3 cards. And with that, Mango's actually allowed to take his turn. He plays Memorial to Unity untapped, then cast Utvara Hellkite, and then follows up the Utvara Hellkite with Terastodon, blowing up his own snow-covered plains, Memorial to Unity, and Cinderglade. He does of course get 3 3/3 elephants from doing that, then goes to the end of his turn with a Reese the Redeemed in play. Over to Joe's turn again, he casts Alabu, and all he has to do there is send the flyers in towards Mango to go wide, and the rest come in at me. I get shot by the Alabu, and he's probably going wide on me regardless. And that is the game to Joe. And there we are, that was the first ever paper game to ever be released on this channel. I want to thank you all for watching all the way through. Hopefully this will be the first of many paper games on the channel, but it does all rely on the support that I receive from here. Liking, commenting and sharing the video will help with YouTube's algorithms and hopefully get the video out to more viewers. Big thank you to if you decide to do that, looking forward to your feedback. I'm tribalkai on the EDH channel. Thank you for watching.